All right, we got a few followers. I'm just waiting for a couple more people, and we'll get started in about a minute. Thanks for hanging in there. Okay, we're going to get started. Hi, I'm Mike Ritchie. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the owner and founder of D3 Multisport. I'm also a level 3 USAT coach, one of 18 in the country, and I've been coaching triathletes since 1992. I started coaching right around the time I was leaving college, and I worked in the corporate world for a while. And then 2001, I incorporated D3 and went professionally and been coaching full-time since. Currently, D3 has 10 incredibly passionate coaches that work with athletes all over the world. Incredibly proud of how awesome they all are and how professional they are, and how they help their athletes season after season reach new goals. And it's just amazing that the passion they bring to the sport, and keeps the athletes motivated. It certainly keeps me motivated, and we all love what we do. So that's pretty cool. And it's almost like not having a job in a lot of ways. So it's neat to help people and see them reach their goals. Okay. If you do have a question, just use the upper right-hand corner of the chat box, and we'll get to the questions at the end. Okay, thanks. All right. So when I first started racing in 1988, really we used RPE. We didn't have a lot of metrics to use. You could take resting heart rate. You had pace in the pool, and you had miles per hour on the bike, obviously, and pace on the run, but no real metrics to understand like what was happening to your body. I think in 1989, I bought my first heart rate monitor, which I still have. It's fallen apart, but it's still in one piece. It's not functional, but I do have it. So over the last several years, we've gotten into obviously power meters in the bike and power on the run. We still have pace in the run, obviously, and pace in the pool. But you know, the old HRV has kind of come back, and that was something that the Russians actually used in the 60s, I believe. Like that was the first time it really started getting used a lot more. And then from there, we've been able to use it to kind of measure, you know, how we're feeling day to day, you know, in terms of rest and stress. So, you know, first of all, what is HRV? So HRV is the physiological phenomenon of variation in a time interval between heartbeats. So basically, just measures the time between beats. And why is that important? Well, basically, there's two different responses to this, right? So there's one is the parasympathetic, and the second is sympathetic. So parasympathetic controls your rest and digest, activities needed to recovery, and it's for long-term survival, right? Heartbeats are inconsistent, and that's healthy. You want your heartbeat to be inconsistent, and that means that things are actually going well. Sympathetic controls the flight or fight stress. So that's the live or die, basically. And it's needed for short-term survival. Heartbeats are super consistent to conserve energy, and you keep your body alive under severe duress. So we don't ever really want to get to that point. It does happen, but we try to avoid it. So typically, when you measure your HRV score and it's higher, this means in general you're healthier. And when your score is lower, it means you're closer to the flight or fight response. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. But your body can't get to the point to help itself recover, and that's, you know, you kind of get that whole thing where you don't want to train and everything is a chore and everybody annoys you and everything in the world is miserable. So we've all been there when we've overtrained. So we try to avoid that. And this obviously HRV can help us avoid that. So, you know, obviously this can be from overtraining, poor fitness, lack of sleep, and, you know, life stress, et cetera, et cetera. So that's pretty normal. So factors that decrease HRV. So when your HRV is trending down, these are the kind of things that are happening. You have physical stress from intensive training. Okay, that's normal, but then you pile on top of it mental stress from work, life stress. That's actually normal, but then you throw in insufficient recovery and rest and sleep, poor diet, meaning, you know, too many refined carbs, not enough fruit and vegetables, etc. Excessive alcohol doesn't help. Dehydration, jet lag, high altitude, smoking, illness, inflammation, disease, and obviously increasing age. So all those things will decrease your HRV. So factors that help your HRV and actually make it increase: recovery, rest and sleep, the top of the list. high aerobic fitness levels, meaning you're training at a healthy level. Relaxation, that which means social activities, listening to music, yoga, breathing exercises. Good nutritional choices, especially non-refined carbs, fruits, vegetables. And then how do you avoid going into sympathetic response? Well, the answer is actually pretty easy. It's just by following your heart rate, following your plan, not going over into zones you shouldn't be in, whether it's on the bike or the run, swimming harder than you should on the swim, etc. So probably all the things you've probably heard from your coaches before, and you'll continue to hear them until you can follow it and follow the plan and start seeing the results you want. So that's a little bit about the parasympathetic and sympathetic response. And coincidentally, most injuries will happen to an athlete when they're tired and the verge of overtraining and then not following the plan. We all know that training, hard day after day in a zone that's above our aerobic threshold is going to lead to injury. We've all know it. We've done it. Sometimes it just, it can't be helped. We're creatures of habit. And sometimes, even though it may say take a day off, we want to go do a 3-mile run or an hour bike, whatever it is. So, sticking to the plan is really important. And HRV certainly, and I say this to my athletes, like, let me give you the excuse to take the day off. Like, don't feel like it's on you. Like, I said to do it, so just do it. Don't feel guilty about it. And I know sometimes athletes, do feel guilty about taking a day off. So let's get into some of the devices and some of the apps that you can use to track it. So one of the first ones I used was called iAthlete. Used with heart rate monitor. I consider that one very accurate. I thought it was very good. It also uses a color-coded system, which I believe was green was go, meaning do all the workouts you need to because you're in a good spot. Yellow was you can train, but make sure it's easy. And then red was don't train at all. And this effectively, the color system, we're going to use that for the point of this presentation. I think it's easy to understand. The second app that I've used is HRV4. That uses a camera on your phone, and you just stick your finger on the back of it. I have had good success with it. I know some other athletes that have too. I did some research on some of this. So some of the research says that it can be inaccurate due to the camera, and I can see that, and I think that's why you probably want the strap. It works a little better. The other thing is the O-ring, which is a ring that you actually wear. We have a couple of athletes that use that. It measures the HRV each day. It doesn't. You don't have to like stop, and measure it for a minute or two like you do with the first two. It just takes you during the day, and it gives you it at the beginning of each day, so you know where you stand with HRV. And then the last one that I researched was HRV Elite, which is a finger sensor, kind of like the pulsometer used for oxygen. And it's non-invasive. You stick your finger, and it measures HRV for the day, which is pretty easy too. So, and I've heard that one's accurate as well. So, okay. So how do you know if you're in a good spot, a bad spot with regards to HRV? So a green is, if you're usually they give you a number of 1 to 100, and we'll use that for the example. But 1 to 100, if you're 90 plus in green, usually that's positive, and it's okay to train away, whatever it is, intervals, easy day, long, hard, etc. But if you get a reading of 65 in red, that means you probably should take a day off. And then the in between, it's probably between, I think, 75 or 78 and 90. Sometimes it's yellow, and that is a middle range, which may tell you to train, but keep it easy. So all these programs use a different scoring system, but they're similar in a lot of ways. So the big question is, does all this coincide with training and racing? So this is kind of where I am with HRV. I've been tracking this. I've been using it for a number of years. I've had my athletes using it off and on, kind of periodically as we get into build periods and see what's going on. But one of the things I'm trying to figure out is if there's a way to actually see if an athlete is, close to taper or ready, to have a good race based on HRV. And we need, obviously, we want a green, green and a 90 plus to see this happen on race day. And I'll get into that a little bit at the end here. But the first thing we know, the number one thing I think that affects HRV the most is really just rest and sleep. And when that works, usually you're going to have a green day or a yellow day. We don't see too many red days. Certainly they happen, but we don't really want to go there too often. It just means you're pretty much draining the tank, and it's going to take a few days to come back. And if you can stay yellow and take a day off when you need it versus going to red and having to take a day off, then that kind of sets things back, more than a day or two. And I would rather stay in a yellow situation than a red situation. So I know a lot of us, when you're training, you may think, oh, what's one more hard day? But it's just the science is here to tell us not to do that. You got a coach in your ear saying the same thing. So, if you are going to use HRV, hopefully you'll have the second metric here, which is the app to say don't do it, and maybe that'll give you enough incentive not to. So we'll just talk about the 3 stages. The first stage is green. So, overtraining develops out of the phenomena of overreaching, which overreaching is what we do in training. We train hard, we let our bodies recover, and we get stronger. That's just normal. When an athlete, trains slightly out of their ability, that's, when they're going to get that stimulus and get faster, right? You can't just keep training, slow pace all the time to improve. You got to throw some sort of interval in there, some sort of stress on the body. It could be more volume. It could be longer workouts. It could be more frequent workouts. But it could also just be more intervals, so harder workouts, right? So this slight stress on the body's physical, chemical, and mental state is an important aspect of becoming a better athlete. There's always a gray area between easy training and overtraining and overreaching, right? The overreaching can certainly boost performance, but if you get to the overtraining piece, that's when you're going to get into trouble. So when you don't back off, that's when athletes continue to push down the road to overtraining. And exactly when you go from overreaching to overtraining is really hard to assess. We can kind of use HRV a little bit to see this if we're super consistent with the scoring and using it on a day-to-day basis. So the second stage, which I would just call yellow, is sympathetic overtraining. So most athletes recognize the start of overtraining. They can see this, but at this point, as overtraining progresses, imbalances of various systems worsen, and they become more difficult to remedy easily. And you get into that state of, oh, just one more day, and that's really where you run into trouble. But the signs for this, usually resting heart rate's up, your normal heart rate is up from day to day, and it just doesn't decrease. It just doesn't come back down. And we all know, like, you go out to run and you just feel kind of sluggish and the heart rate's high. And if you can be smart and just, kill the workout and cut it short, and the next day you'll come back and you feel a lot better. But if you don't do that, that's when you kind of run into that problem of just continually, driving yourself into the ground. And this has more to do with high cortisol, which increases the insulin levels. That reduces fat burning, right? Increases fat storage. And then, even aerobic training becomes hard. And basically you just start to feel really bad all the time. And then the last stage, which is the red, which is the do not train stage, that's parasympathetic overtraining. That's chronic overtraining that can lead to more serious brain, muscle, and metabolic imbalances. And these continue to parallel chronic adrenal dysfunction, and chronic fatigue syndrome can set in after a while. Eventually, once the body becomes exhausted, many hormones are significantly reduced, and then, it's the opposite of stages 1 and 2. You have low cortisol. So this contributes to worsening physical, chemical, and a mental condition. So, typically this is when you're going to have a lack of desire to train. Athletes may get to the point where they train themselves so hard that they actually have to retire. I think Ryan Hall did that. Like, he just went so hard all the time that basically he ended up with chronic fatigue syndrome and just was never able to pull himself out of it. So he retired from competitive sports. You just can't keep up with normal training or paces, and typically you end with injuries and that. So we never really want to go there. It happens from time to time, but if you know your athlete and know what you're doing in terms of having a good communication and knowing when an athlete's really starting to get down into that point, that's when you back off and take a few days off or a couple easy days, whatever it is, to kind of turn things around. So what I've seen with my athletes that do use HRV, when it's consistent, we can use the data pretty effectively. So I'm going to give you a couple real world examples. As I said, my goal as a coach is never to get to stage 3. It certainly does happen, but if we keep an eye on it, we can back off and get back on track pretty quickly. So if we use the levels of green, yellow, and red, I had a few of my athletes just track this for the past 30 to 45 days, just for this exercise, and write notes in it. And one of the things I never saw was a yellow day or a stage 2 day in a great workout. Almost every single person said, felt okay, had to push through, a real stellar day. But I did see quite a bit of great workout that coincided with the green day, so that made sense. From my own experience, what I've experienced in this over the years, when I have a red day and then go train, I just never felt well. Maybe it was mental, but I never was able to go out there and push through and say, wow, I feel great today, even though it told me not to train. Like that just never made sense to me physiologically. And then the other side, I've had days that I've gotten up and said, there's no way I can do that bike workout and hit those watts. And, I get up and the HRV says, green, go. And I'm like, there's no way. Then I get on the bike, warm up, and then boom, I can hit the watts. So there's something to this. It's definitely works. It's definitely the idea that there's some science behind this, and this is something that we can rely on. I think if the readings are consistent, we can rely on this to, really use it effectively to know where we are in our training and what we should be doing. So one other interesting thing, and I mentioned this a little bit before, was just seeing if we can line up HRV with where we are in a taper. And I just had one of my athletes race a 70.3. And interesting enough, when looking through her notes, the race was on Saturday, and she had a green day on Thursday, and her taper workouts were great workouts, fantastic, was flying, it was amazing. So you always think that taper is going to last, 2 or 3 days. Then the next day was sluggish, and I was like, well, sometimes that happens, but people kind of recover and come back around, for race day. So, race day was actually yellow again, which, that's usually just, easy day, don't go hard. And obviously she had a race and she just fell flat. So there may be something to figuring out how to taper with this stuff too. Trying to tie that into a little bit what we're doing and maybe follow it a little more closely and see if we can tweak things to get an athlete, obviously a green day on the most important day of the year for them, which is the race day. And then one more observation I have is that an athlete traveled coast to coast, and I think most people can relate to this. As a lot of us travel and have families and travel for work and everything. But this one athlete traveled coast to coast almost weekly. He would leave the East Coast with a green HRV, and after getting to the West Coast, 2 time zones away, lots of time at 35,000 feet, he'd get up the next day and HRV would be red. Like it looked like he ran a 20-mile run. It was just completely nothing in the tank. He'd go to run, legs would be dead. And then we just started putting it together. Like he needed a rest day after a travel day. That just made sense. So anytime he traveled, we penciled that in there, and that just made his training a lot better. And we just were able to be way more efficient with what we were doing with him. So maybe he did a hard day the day before he left, easy day when he got there, or no working out when he got there, and then an easy day, and then right back into normal training again. So when you travel and you feel sluggish, it's not your imagination. So keep that in mind. There is science behind this. So I'm going to take a couple questions now, and hopefully I can answer them. Let's see here. All right. So good question. First one was mentioned 3 apps and new gadgets. Can this be done with a regular heart rate monitor and a Garmin? So Garmin does have an HRV app. It's on the I think it's on the Phoenix and the 935. I don't know that it's as accurate as these other apps. And these other apps, actually, they're inexpensive. They're probably about, I think it's $9 for the iAthlete and maybe $15 for the HRV4. So not super expensive. You can look up the pricing on some of these. They're not more than $15. So, they'll try to upsell you different things later. But if you just really do the HRV, I think it's pretty inexpensive. Can I send an email? Yes, I'll send an email out. I'll post it somehow with the apps and devices I mentioned for sure. Let's see. Garmin has an HRV testing option on the Phoenix using heart rate strap and 3-minute test while sitting relaxed. I haven't tried it, but I can try it, and I'll let you guys know what I think of that. Let's see. Yes, Bernie Ryan asked about the OU ring, and that's what it is, OU ring. I don't know how you actually pronounce that, right? Do I think stress affects heart rate? So leading to a race, can heart rate be low due to stress? Yeah, I think that's possible. That could be what that athlete actually ran into. It could have just been stress driving HRV down. But when you're flat, you're flat. So that's really one of those things that, maybe you just need more alone time as an athlete and hang around with less triathletes and less stress. It's hard to say there. Do I recommend the HRV strap or finger sensor? I would use the heart rate monitor strap, definitely. That's the one I think that works the best because it's a Bluetooth technology. I think that's pretty solid. I'm not too sold on the finger with the sensor yet, the Elite HRV, but I haven't tested it either. But I will do more research on this because this is a pretty interesting topic, actually. So, okay. I don't see any other questions. Okay. It's just about time's up. If you have any other questions, you can email me, mike@d3multisport.com. Happy to help, and thank you for joining. Appreciate it.